Chris Edwards was voted most likely to get an ulcer by his high school friends. I know a few people who could have given him a run for his money, but as it turns out, he went into a wildly successful award-winning advertising career at Arnold Worldwide. Not only was he the first to ever use YouTube content in a TV ad,
I'm into nuggets, y'all.
McNuggets, McNuggets, what? McNuggets, McNuggets, what?
he's laughing. I'm not sure if he's embarrassed or not. He's also the creative genius behind one of the biggest commercial earworms there ever was.
Well, if it were you hanging up on this wall, if it were you in that sandwich, you wouldn't be laughing at all. So give me that flesh, give me that flesh.
I own one of those. Little may you have known all the while, Chris was on his own journey. In 1995, long before the term transgender was known, he began transitioning, undergoing dozens of surgeries to become the man he says he always knew he was meant to be. He ended up quitting Arnold, writing a memoir about his experience with great courage and humor. It's called Balls. It takes some to get some. Chris joins me now. Chris, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Jim.
Tell the story again. You came out to your grandmother at 5 years old.
Yeah.
What happened and how did you know?
Well, I always knew I was a boy. And it was the time when I first knew other people didn't know that I was a boy, was when I was about 5.
What happened?
With my grandmother. So my older sister and I were coloring in her den, and she passed by us with her platters of food to put to the dinner table, and she said, "Come on, girls, dinner's ready." And my sister sprang up and followed her to the table, and I didn't flinch, you know. I just didn't think she was talking to me. So she came back over, and she said, "Didn't you hear me calling you?" And I said, "No." And she said, "I said, come on, girls." And I looked at her like she was insane, and I said, "I'm not a girl." She said, "Oh, yes, yes, you are." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm a boy."
What was in your head?
What was in my head was, how could she possibly think this, and what is it about me that's making her make this mistake? And are other people making this mistake?
Can we fast forward a little bit to your time? I think it's 95. If I get some dates wrong, apologies. You're at Arnold, and you start transitioning. As I said, no transgender, no fight for transgender rights. No. Were you not scared out of your mind when you made this decision?
Yeah, and my initial plan was to move away or do it in secret.
Why didn't you?
My therapist got me to realize that that might sound like an easy way out, but it would actually be a lot more stressful in the long run, and that I was going to need support to help get through this. And, you know, trying to do something in secret and worrying, and, you know, it was just, she said, "Why don't you consider it?"
And you had coworkers you thought were, if there are right people to whom you tell this story and live through, they're them. But that's where you worked. And your father ran the joint, which obviously helps create a more accepting environment.
Yes.
But what I never understood when I'm reading this thing, 2 years later, I think it is, you go to your high school reunion. I get highs thinking about going to my high school reunion. I am not transitioning. What's in your head then when you say, I'm going to go encounter probably a bunch of people who are not the most sensitive kinds of people in 97. So what happened there?
I wasn't going to go. Right up until the week before, I wasn't going. And my best friends were running it. And they said, you know, trying to convince me. And I said, "You guys, I can't deal with it. I'm friends with you. I see you. I haven't seen these people." And they said, "Well, what do you want us to tell people when they ask where you are?" And that's when it hit me that whatever they tell them, if I don't go, people are going to think I'm ashamed. And I was not ashamed.
Were you terrified when you went?
I was. So I was planning that I would get really drunk first, which my friends made sure I did. And then we had some rules set up where they were not to leave me alone. And we got there, at least for the first 10 minutes, they weren't to leave me alone. And they broke that rule right out of the gate because they were all drunk.
But your friends were accepting, from what I understand.
But my friends were. It was crazy. And I was worried because I was thinking about them as 17-year-olds, not 28-year-old adults who have grown up since then.
Why'd you write this book? Is it for you, for other people? Who did you write this for?
I wrote this book to help change perception about what it means to be transgender, and also to help, you know, one of the things is the suicide attempt rate for transgender youth is 50%, 50. And a lot of that has to do with families, their families aren't supportive. And I strongly feel if there were more everyday success stories that parents could look at, and even the trans kids could look at and see, well, that person did it, and they turned out fine. My kid will be okay.
Yeah, but you're not quite Caitlyn Jenner, but you're fairly wealthy, I assume. You've got a powerful
Parents.
father. Well, they are, but I mean, you came from a family. You came out in an environment that was relatively supportive. You're not the typical transgender kid, or
Well,
you were
you don't
not
know
that you're
that.
talking about,
No,
right?
you don't know that. I mean, transgender does not discriminate by race or financial income or anything. It can happen to anybody. So my voice is just as important as other voices, but there are other voices, and a lot of people are not as privileged as I was lucky to have parents who could afford the surgeries I wanted to have. And, you know, there are plenty of people just like me in the same economic stratus.
You know, I would never use this term if you didn't use it, so now I feel I
Okay.
can. You chose the deluxe model,
Yes.
as you taught, which required
Yes.
tons of surgeries. Why'd you decide to go that far when many other transgender people decide not to?
Most decide not to.
Why?
because,
Why'd you do that?
I am a Taurus. I am very stubborn. And right out of the gate, I knew I was a guy, and I wanted to be as close to a biological male as possible. And that meant 22 surgeries over 5 years.
So we only have 1 minute left.
Yeah.
Frankie the Fish. I own one. It
Yeah.
cost me like $48 or something.
You got ripped off,
Can you
dude.
give me the quick version of how that came about? I always want.
Yeah.
How do people conjure
So,
up these things?
Actually, we had to come up with a spot, and the strategy was make filet of fish something people will think about all the time, not just during Lent. And so my creative team, you know, came up with this based on Billy Bass that was already out there, and we just didn't have the song. So we're shooting the commercial, we still didn't have the song. And they were listening to tracks, and so while we're shooting it, you know, we're just making the mouth of the fish go. And my producer came over and he said, all right, here are some selects. And he just started playing the ones they selected, and he played a random one that wasn't selected. And I said, wait a minute. And he was like, oh, wait, that wasn't one of the selects. I could just keep playing it. And it got stuck in my head.
And you knew right there?
And I knew it, and I called the director over, and he goes, oh, that's the one. So, yeah.
That was the one.
And then after the spot aired, 2 hours after, someone posted it on YouTube, and it went
The rest is
viral.
history.
Yeah.
Chris, nice to see you.
was great to
Congratulations.
hear.
Good luck.
Thank
By the way,
you.
your book is terrific.
Thank
Thanks
you so
for your
much.
time. Book again is called Balls. It takes some to get some.